Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to a period where the rustle of straw mattresses was the loudest sound after sunset, and the notion of a late-night Netflix binge was, well, entirely unimaginable. Imagine the scent of damp earth and wood smoke clinging to the air, the rhythmic chirp of crickets your only soundtrack, and the profound, impenetrable darkness of a world without electric light. You're bundled in rough-spun linen, the thin sliver of moonlight barely piercing the small, leaded pane of glass in your tiny room. The chill seeps in, even in summer, a constant reminder of the raw, untamed world outside your modest, timbered dwelling. You might even hear the distant hoot of an owl, a sound that in this era feels less like a comforting nightly presence and more like a harbinger of the unknown, perhaps even a reminder of the fleeting nature of life itself. And speaking of fleeting, you probably won't survive this journey if you're used to scrolling past midnight. Your modern, light-polluted brain simply isn't ready for the deep, unwavering commitment to slumber that we're about to explore. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a Puritan village, a place where time isn't measured by the tick-tock of a fancy grandfather clock, but by the relentless march of the sun across the sky and the shifting shadows it casts. Your day, as a Puritan child, begins not with the gentle nudge of a parent, but with the first faint blush of dawn, often long before the sun itself has cleared the horizon. There's no hitting the snooze button, no lingering in the warmth of your bed. The morning air, crisp and biting, serves as your alarm clock, and the scent of freshly baked bread from the communal oven or the distant bleating of sheep signals that the day's arduous tasks are already well underway. This isn't just about waking up early. It's about a deeply ingrained societal and religious philosophy that viewed idleness as a sin and industriousness as a virtue. Every moment, every hour, every breath was seen as a gift from God to be used productively to glorify Him. Historians still argue whether the Puritan emphasis on rigid schedules was primarily a theological imposition or a practical necessity born of the harsh colonial environment. Was a divine decree or sheer survival? Perhaps a bit of both, a symbiotic relationship where faith informed daily practice and daily practice reinforced faith. What's clear is that the rhythm of life in a Puritan household was a meticulously choreographed dance, with every step, every movement, serving a specific purpose. You, as a child, are an integral part of this intricate ballet. Your very existence is woven into the fabric of the community's labor from the moment you wake until the moment you lay your head down again. There's no wasted motion, no frivolous pursuits. It's a world where even your thoughts are expected to be productive and godly. It's enough to make you yearn for the blissful, unstructured chaos of a modern Saturday morning, isn't it? But here, there are no Saturdays, only days, each one a mirror of the last, each one demanding your utmost effort. As the sun begins its slow ascent, painting the eastern sky with hues of rose and gold, you, as a young Puritan, are already immersed in the rhythm of the household. There's no dawdling, no leisurely breakfast of sugary cereals and cartoon watching. Instead, your morning meal is likely a simple, hearty porridge, eaten quickly and in silence, perhaps with a short prayer of thanks. Your childhood, as we understand it today, simply doesn't exist in this era. There are no play dates, no organized sports, no elaborate birthday parties with clowns and bouncy castles. The concept of childhood as a distinct, protected period of innocence and leisure is a relatively modern invention. For you, childhood is a brief apprenticeship for adulthood, a time of learning through doing, a period of diligent preparation for the demanding life that awaits. Your days are structured around work and worship, two inseparable pillars of Puritan society. You might be helping your mother with the churning of butter, the spinning of wool, or the endless task of mending clothes. Or perhaps you're out in the fields with your father, tending to crops, feeding livestock, or chopping wood, your small hands rough and callous from the labor. There's a pervasive sense that every member of the family, regardless of age, must contribute to the household's survival and prosperity. This isn't just about economic necessity. It's also deeply rooted in their religious beliefs. Idleness, remember, was seen as the devil's workshop, a breeding ground for sin. Therefore, keeping children constantly engaged in useful tasks was not only practical, but also a moral imperative. It was a way to instill discipline, prevent mischievous thoughts, and guide them onto the path of righteousness. It's hard to imagine the sheer exhaustion, isn't it? The kind of bone-deep weariness that settles into your very bones after a day spent from dawn till dusk in unceasing physical labor. A quirky tidbit often overlooked is the surprising formality of Puritan family interactions. While not without affection, displays of overt emotionality, especially from children, were often discouraged. You might be expected to address your parents with a certain deference, perhaps even bowing your head as a sign of respect. This stern outward demeanor, however, often masked deep familial bonds forged in the crucible of shared hardship and unwavering faith. Historians still argue whether the perceived emotional restraint of Puritans truly reflected a lack of feeling or was simply a cultural norm for expressing emotion in a society that valued stoicism and self-control. Did they hug? Probably not in the way we think of it today. But did they love? Without a doubt, though it was often expressed through diligent provision and strict guidance. So, as the sun begins its slow descent, you're not winding down with a video game or a favorite book. You're likely still engaged in some task, perhaps gathering eggs from the chicken coop, bringing in the last of the firewood, or helping prepare the evening meal. The waning light is your signal, a gentle but firm reminder that the day, and with it the opportunity for productive labor, is drawing to a close. There's no artificial light to extend the day's activities, no bright screens to keep your mind buzzing. It's a world that forces you to align your internal clock with the natural rhythms of the earth, a concept that feels almost alien in our perpetually illuminated modern world. The approaching twilight is not just a sign of nightfall. It's a silent command, a natural curfew imposed by the very laws of the universe. With the last sliver of sun dipping below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the landscape, the focus shifts within the Puritan household. There's a palpable sense of winding down, not in the leisurely sense we know, but in a purposeful preparation for the night ahead. The evening meal, typically a simple and frugal affair of stew, bread, and perhaps some cheese or vegetables, is eaten with quiet reverence. Conversation is minimal, often centered around scripture or a recounting of the day's events in a matter-of-fact manner. There are no boisterous dinner table debates or light-hearted banter that might distract from more serious contemplation. This is a time for reflection, for acknowledging God's grace in sustaining them through another day. Following the meager supper, the family gathers for evening prayers. This isn't a quick, mumbled recitation before collapsing into bed. It's a significant part of their daily ritual, a time for communal devotion, Bible reading, and often a lengthy sermon or explanation of Scripture by the head of the household. For you, as a child, this could be a test of endurance. Try to stay awake and attentive as the often complex theological concepts are discussed. Imagine trying to focus on the finer points of predestination when all you can think about is the comforting embrace of sleep. Yet, this early exposure to religious instruction was considered paramount. It was believed that instilling a deep understanding of God's Word from a young age was crucial for salvation. Historians still debate the long-term psychological impact of this intense religious upbringing on Puritan children, particularly the constant awareness of sin and the fear of eternal damnation. Was it a source of unwavering faith or hidden anxieties? The answer, undoubtedly, is complex and varied from individual to individual. The connection between early education and early bedtime in Puritan society is a fascinating one. Education, primarily focused on literacy, so that individuals could read the Bible for themselves, was taken seriously. However, the school day was often long and rigorous, filled with rote memorization and strict discipline. This intellectual exertion, coupled with the demands of physical labor, naturally led to exhaustion by the end of the day. A quirky aspect of Puritan education was the prevalence of the horn book, a single sheet of text, usually the alphabet and the Lord's Prayer, protected by a thin layer of transparent horn and attached to a wooden handle. Imagine trying to learn your letters from such a rudimentary tool by the dim light of a flickering candle. It underscores the challenges of acquiring knowledge in this era. Furthermore, the content of their education heavily emphasized religious doctrine and moral instruction. Children were taught about the importance of obedience, piety, and hard work. These values, of course, directly reinforced the need for a structured daily life that included early bedtimes. A well-rested child, according to Puritan beliefs, was better equipped to learn their lessons and fulfill their duties to God and their family. Sleep wasn't just a biological necessity. It was a tool for maintaining order and promoting godliness within the community. So, as the evening prayers conclude and the final amens are spoken, there's a natural sense of drawing the day to a close. The dim light of the tallow candles begins to flicker, and a profound quiet settles over the household, a silence that speaks volumes about the expectations for the night ahead. With the last flicker of the tallow candle threatening to extinguish itself, casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls, your daily toil doesn't truly cease until you are tucked, however briefly, into your meager bed. For Puritan children, the concept of a carefree existence was a distant dream. From the moment you could walk, your small hand were put to work, an essential cog in the household machinery. You weren't merely an inhabitant. You were a contributor, an active participant in the ceaseless struggle for survival and self-sufficiency. Imagine being a child, no older than 7 or 8, and being expected to perform tasks that would make a modern teenager wilt. You might be responsible for gathering kindling for the morning fire, ensuring the livestock are watered, or even tending to younger siblings with a level of maturity far beyond your years. These were not optional activities. They were ingrained duties, taught through direct instruction and the powerful example of your parents and elders. The Puritan ideal of industriousness permeated every aspect of life, and children were no exception. A child who was not working was considered idle, and an idle mind, as the saying went, was the devil's playground. So, while you might envy the seemingly endless free time of your modern counterparts, your Puritan self is constantly engaged, constantly contributing. This relentless schedule, of course, naturally led to a profound physical exhaustion by day's end, making early bedtimes less a punitive measure and more practical necessity. There's no energy left for rebellion, no reserves for youthful mischief. Your body simply craves rest. A mainstream historical fact often highlighted is the importance of family units in Puritan society. These weren't just emotional bonds, they were economic and social foundations. Every member, from the youngest to the oldest, played a vital role in the collective survival and spiritual well-being of the household. A quirky tidbit related to chores is the specific roles assigned to children based on gender, even at very young ages. Boys, for example, might be taught to whittle wood for spoons or repair simple tools, preparing them for agricultural or artisanal trades. Girls, on the other hand, would be instructed in spinning, weaving, and the intricate art of making candles, skills crucial for running a successful home. Historians still argue whether these rigid gender roles were purely practical adaptations to the demands of colonial life or deeply rooted in prevailing theological interpretations of male and female spheres. Was it necessity or doctrine? The answer probably lies in the uncomfortable middle. Think of the sheer volume of tasks that had to be completed by hand, without the aid of modern conveniences. Every stitch of clothing was sewn, every meal prepared from raw ingredients, every candle dipped. The amount of labor was staggering, and children were integrated into this system from their earliest years. You learn quickly that your contribution, however small, is critical. Your chores aren't just about discipline, they're about survival. And as the evening draws in and the last of these duties are completed, the weary ache in your muscles is a tangible reminder of a day well spent in the Puritan sense of the word. The approaching darkness isn't just about the absence of light. It's the welcoming embrace of a much-needed, hard-earned reprieve. As the deep shadows of evening creep into every corner of the modest Puritan home, the air itself seems to thicken with an almost sacred hush. This isn't merely the cessation of the day's labor. It's a deliberate transition into a period of spiritual reflection, one that is deeply intertwined with the concept of rest. For the Puritans, sleep wasn't just a biological necessity. It was a divinely ordained state, a gift from God that allowed the body and soul to be refreshed, ready to serve Him anew with the rising sun. You're not simply going to bed. You are, in a sense, fulfilling a spiritual obligation. To deny yourself adequate rest was to deny God's provision, to be ungrateful for His grace. The theological underpinnings of this view on rest are fascinating. Puritans believed in a God who ordered the universe, and this divine order extended to human existence. Just as God rested on the seventh day after creation, so too were humans meant to observe periods of rest and spiritual contemplation. Idleness, remember, was a sin, but so too was excessive revelry or staying up late for frivolous pursuits. The line was fine and carefully trod. Your bedtime, therefore, was not merely a parental rule, but a reflection of a cosmic order, a tiny ripple in the grand design of the Almighty. It sounds heavy, doesn't it? Imagine a bedtime story that doubles as a sermon on divine providence. A mainstream historical fact about Puritan beliefs is their strong adherence to the concept of providence, meaning God's direct intervention and guidance in all aspects of life. Every event, big or small, was seen as part of God's plan. A quirky tidbit related to this is the Puritan practice of keeping spiritual diaries, or journals, in which they meticulously recorded their daily experiences, looking for signs of God's grace or displeasure. Even the quality of one's sleep might be interpreted as a sign from above. A restless night could be seen as a spiritual struggle, while a peaceful slumber was evidence of God's blessing. Historians still argue whether this intense introspection led to greater self-awareness or, conversely, to an oppressive burden of spiritual anxiety for many Puritans. Was it a path to enlightenment or a highway to neurosis? The answer, as always, is probably somewhere in the murky middle. So, as your parents lead the family in evening prayers, often a prolonged affair filled with scripture readings and earnest petitions, you feel the weight of the day and the weight of spiritual expectation settle upon you. The flickering candlelight makes the familiar faces around you seem almost ghostly, and the quiet murmurs of prayer create a soothing, hypnotic rhythm. There's a certain comfort in the predictability of it all, in the knowledge that this routine, however stringent, is believed to be the path to righteousness and, ultimately, salvation. The approaching bedtime isn't just about escaping the cold or the darkness. It's about entering a state of divinely sanctioned repose, a spiritual preparation for the next day's duties. You close your eyes, not just to sleep, but to submit to the grand, unseen order of the universe, waiting for the quiet whisper of your parents telling you it's time to finally make your way to bed. You feel the gentle but firm hand on your shoulder, a signal that the nightly rituals of prayer and scripture are drawing to a close, and the moment of finally surrendering to sleep is at hand. In the Puritan household, parental authority wasn't just respected, it was absolute, a reflection of God's own divine authority. Your parents, particularly your father, wielded immense power, not out of tyranny, but out of a profound sense of responsibility for your spiritual and moral upbringing. Their word was law, and deviation from it was not only seen as disobedience to them, but, by extension, to God Himself. This unshakable authority was the bedrock upon which the strict enforcement of rules, including your early bedtime, was built. There was no negotiation, no pleading for just 5 more minutes. When the command came, You followed, swiftly and without question. This wasn't because Puritan parents were necessarily devoid of love, far from it, but because they believed their primary duty was to mold you into a God-fearing, industrious, and obedient adult, capable of withstanding the temptations of the world. And instilling discipline from a young age was considered paramount to this endeavor. Imagine living in a home where the very air hums with the expectation of obedience, where every glance from your parent conveys a silent command. It's a level of deference that feels almost alien in our modern, often child-centric world. A mainstream historical fact about Puritan family life is the widespread use of corporal punishment as a disciplinary tool. While this might sound harsh to modern ears, it was seen not as cruelty, but as a necessary means of breaking the will of a child, guiding them away from their inherent sinful nature. A quick, sharp tap with a switch or a stern word was often enough to ensure compliance. A quirky tidbit, however, is that while physical discipline was common, extreme abuse was generally frowned upon within the community, as it could indicate a lack of Christian charity. Neighbors and church elders might intervene if they perceived excessive cruelty, highlighting a surprising, albeit limited, form of social accountability. Historians still argue whether the Puritan approach to discipline, with its emphasis on obedience and swift correction, truly fostered inner moral development or simply produced outwardly compliant, but inwardly resentful individuals. Did it build character or crush spirits? The ongoing debate continues to this day. So, as you slowly make your way to your sleeping arrangements, perhaps a shared bed with siblings, or a simple pallet on the floor near the hearth for warmth, you understand implicitly the boundaries and expectations. The quiet hum of the night outside, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl or the rustle of leaves, emphasizes the solitude and the finality of the day's end. There's no sneaking out of bed for a midnight snack, no whispering secrets with siblings in the dark. The watchful eyes of your parents, coupled with your own ingrained sense of duty and fear of divine displeasure, ensure that once you are down, you stay down. The authority that dictated your waking hours extends seamlessly into your slumber, ensuring a truly undisturbed and early rest. As your head finally touches the rough fabric of your pillow, the last vestiges of daylight having long faded, you realize there's a distinct absence in your world compared to the lives of children today: the concept of dedicated playtime. For the Puritan child, there was no designated playtime, as we understand it, no recess breaks purely for unbridled fun, no afternoon spent on a playground. Your waking hours were a continuous tapestry woven with threads of labor, learning, and religious devotion. The very idea of frivolous amusement for its own sake was often viewed with suspicion, bordering on sinful. After all, if every moment was a gift from God, how could you justify squandering it on idle games? This isn't to say that Puritan children never experienced joy or moments of lightheartedness. Laughter certainly echoed within those timbered walls, and simple pleasures were found in the rhythm of daily life. Perhaps it was the satisfaction of a chore completed, the shared warmth of a hearth in winter, or the fleeting beauty of a wildflower discovered in the fields. But these were often incidental, woven into the fabric of work or family life, rather than being a separate protected sphere. The purpose of a child's life was preparation for adulthood, and play, if it occurred, often had an educational or practical component, such as learning skills through imitation or engaging in simple, non-competitive activities that mirrored adult tasks. A mainstream historical fact is that Puritan communities, particularly in the early colonial period, were incredibly focused on survival and establishing a godly society. This intense focus naturally left little room for what we now consider typical childhood leisure. A quirky tidbit, however, is that while organized play was discouraged, children undoubtedly found ways to entertain themselves with simple toys fashioned from natural materials, like dolls made from corn husks or small carved animals. These moments of self-directed, often solitary, amusement were perhaps the closest they came to play as we define it. Historians still argue whether the lack of formal play fostered a greater sense of resilience and resourcefulness in Puritan children, or if it suppressed their natural creativity and emotional development. Was their stoicism a strength or a limitation? The debate is as old as the historical record itself. So, as you settle into your uncomfortable bed, the quiet of the night enveloping you, there's no lingering thought of a missed play date or a canceled game. Your mind is already drifting, not to the fantastical worlds conjured by modern stories, but to the tangible realities of tomorrow's chores, tomorrow's lessons, and tomorrow's prayers. The weariness in your limbs, the persistent ache from a day of continuous activity, ensures that sleep comes swiftly and deeply. There's no buzzing energy from an afternoon of stimulated play to keep you awake, just the profound exhaustion that only relentless, purposeful labor can bring. The absence of childhood play isn't just a historical footnote. It's a profound explanation for why Puritan children truly needed those early, strict bedtimes. Their bodies and minds were simply done for the day. As the quiet darkness truly descends upon the Puritan village, you notice something profound. The rhythm of sleep isn't just a personal matter. It's a communal one. When your family finally extinguishes their last candle, the entire village seems to follow suit, plunging into a shared, profound silence. There are no distant streetlights, no glow from a neighbor's television, no lingering sounds of late-night revelry. The only lights you might discern are the pinpricks of stars in a sky untainted by light pollution, or perhaps the faint, reddish glow of embers through a neighbor's chimney, a silent testament to the dwindling warmth within their hearths. This collective adherence to an early sleep schedule is a fascinating reflection of their tightly knit, interdependent communities. Imagine the sheer stillness. The creaking of floorboards in your own house is amplified, and outside, the rustling of leaves or the hoot of an owl seems to carry for miles. There's no fear of missing out, no social pressure to stay awake. In fact, quite the opposite. To be awake and visible after dark, unless for an emergency or a grave necessity, would be considered peculiar, even suspicious. This communal sleep habit reinforced the social order and the shared values of the community, productivity during the day, and respectful rest at night. It's a level of synchronization that we, with our individualistic 24/7 lifestyles, can barely comprehend. A mainstream historical fact is that Puritan communities were often structured around a central meeting house, which served as both a church and a civic gathering place, emphasizing their collective identity. A quirky tidbit related to their communal sleep is that watchmen, if a town was large enough to have them, would often call out the hours through the night, but these calls were generally sparse and serve as a reassurance of order rather than a disturbance. Their presence further underscored the idea that even during sleep, the community was unified and protected. Historians still argue whether this pervasive communal oversight fostered a stronger sense of belonging and mutual support, or if it led to an oppressive lack of individual freedom and privacy. Was it solidarity or surveillance? The answer, as you might expect, depends on whose perspective you're considering. So, as you drift off, snuggled under your rough blankets, you are not alone in your slumber. You are part of a collective act of repose, a village-wide surrender to the demands of the natural world. The early morning light will bring with it the renewed communal awakening, the familiar sounds of animals stirring, fires being stoked, and the gentle hum of a village preparing for another day of earnest labor and pious living. But for now, in the profound darkness, the silence is almost absolute, a testament to the fact that when the Puritans went to bed, the entire world around them seemed to follow suit, ensuring a deep and uninterrupted night's rest for all. This communal rhythm, driven by both faith and practicality, was a powerful force, pulling everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, into the arms of an early, shared sleep. As you lie in your bed, the stillness of the Puritan night is occasionally broken by a cough from a sibling, or perhaps the distant cry of a baby. These small disturbances serve as stark reminders of another ever-present reality that profoundly influenced Puritan life, and, by extension, their sleep habits. The pervasive threat of illness and the chillingly high mortality rates. In this era, before modern medicine, before antibiotics, even before a clear understanding of germ theory, disease was an unpredictable and often swift killer. A simple fever could escalate rapidly, a common cold could turn into pneumonia, and childbirth was a perilous journey for both mother and infant. For you, as a Puritan child, the awareness of sickness and death was not abstract. It was part of your daily existence. You likely knew children who didn't survive past infancy, or perhaps a parent or an older sibling who succumbed to an unknown ailment. This constant vulnerability underscored the fragility of life and reinforced the Puritan belief in divine providence that every breath was a gift and every moment could be your last. In such a precarious world, rest wasn't just about physical recovery. It was about conserving precious energy, strengthening the body, and giving it the best possible chance to withstand the myriad unseen threats that lurked in the air and water. Sleep became a vital, almost desperate, act of self-preservation. A mainstream historical fact is that infant and child mortality rates in the 17th century were extraordinarily high, with a significant portion of children not surviving to adulthood. This grim reality deeply impacted family structures and emotional lives. A quirky tidbit is the common use of various herbal remedies and folk cures, often passed down through generations to combat illnesses. While some of these had genuine medicinal properties, many were based on superstition and lacked scientific efficacy, yet they were all that was available. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rates led to a certain emotional detachment from children as a coping mechanism, or if it simply intensified the profound love and grief experienced by parents, making every child's life even more precious. Did it harden hearts or deepen affection? It's a somber and complex question with no easy answers. So, as you draw your worn blanket closer, the sounds of the night or the lack thereof become a soft lullaby. There are no emergency sirens to disrupt the peace, no distant hospital lights. Medical intervention, if it came at all, was rudimentary. Therefore, the body's natural ability to heal and recuperate through sleep was held in even higher regard. Your early bedtime, enforced by the dictates of both faith and practicality, was a quiet acknowledgement of the battle your body waged daily against an invisible enemy. It was an unspoken prayer for strength, a nightly surrender to the restorative power of rest, in a world where good health was a fleeting, invaluable commodity. The profound quiet of the Puritan night, which seems so absolute, wasn't always of the same duration. As you lay there, attuned to the subtle shifts in the air, you'd notice that the call for early sleep varied slightly with the seasons. This wasn't a matter of caprice or preference. It was a pragmatic adaptation to the relentless demands of a life deeply intertwined with the natural world. Imagine the difference between a long, languid summer evening, where twilight lingered for hours, and the biting darkness of a winter afternoon, which swallowed the sun before many of your modern-day equivalents would even be home from school. In the summer months, with the sun rising early and setting late, the workday naturally extended. There were crops to tend, hay to cut, and goods to transport during the precious daylight hours. While bedtimes were still early by our standards, they might have been pushed a bit later, perhaps by an hour or so, to maximize the productivity of the longer days. You might have found yourself outside until the very last vestiges of light, finishing a chore or helping to bring in the livestock, the air still warm and buzzing with insects. This slight extension was not a luxury. It was a necessity, a way to make hay while the sun literally shone. Conversely, the onset of winter brought with it a dramatic shift. Days became brutally short, and the cost of artificial light tallow candles or oil lamps was prohibitive for most families. As soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the world into a profound and often bitter cold darkness, activities naturally ceased. The evening meal would be eaten by the dim, flickering light of the hearth, and family prayers would conclude much earlier. There was simply no practical reason to stay awake. It was far more economical and safer to retire to bed. The cold itself was a powerful motivator, driving families to seek the warmth of their shared sleeping spaces, huddled together for comfort. A mainstream historical fact is that agrarian societies like the Puritan settlements were inherently tied to the cycles of nature, with daily life dictated by sunrise and sunset. A quirky tidbit is the concept of first sleep and second sleep, which was more common in pre-industrial Europe, where people might wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night for prayer or quiet contemplation before returning to bed. While this practice may have persisted in some Puritan households, the strong emphasis on early, unbroken rest often pushed them towards a more singular, deeper sleep cycle, especially given the physical exhaustion. Historians still argue whether the stark seasonal variations in work and rest patterns had a significant impact on the overall health and well-being of the Puritan populace. Did they achieve a healthier, more natural rhythm, or did the intense seasonal demands put undue stress on their bodies? The debate continues. So, as you burrow deeper into your covers, listening to the wind howl outside your window in the depth of winter, the early darkness feels less like a restriction and more like a logical conclusion to a day defined by the sun's fleeting presence. Or, in the lingering light of a summer evening, the extra hour or two of daylight feels like a bonus, a brief extension before the inevitable call to rest. These subtle seasonal variations underscore how deeply intertwined Puritan life, work, and sleep were with the uncompromising realities of their environment. Long before the invention of electric light severed our connection to the natural cycle of day and night. The profound darkness that enveloped the Puritan home each night wasn't merely the absence of light. It was a defining characteristic of their existence, and it absolutely dictated their bedtimes. Imagine a world where your sole source of illumination after sunset was the flickering, smoky glow of a tallow candle or the inconsistent warmth from a dying fire in the hearth. This isn't the romanticized notion of candlelight dinners. This is the harsh reality of trying to live and work by such meager light. The sheer practical limitations of early lighting technologies made extended evening activities not just difficult, but often impossible. You see, a single tallow candle provided only a dim, localized glow, barely enough to read by, and certainly not enough to perform intricate tasks like mending clothes or preparing elaborate meals. The cost of these candles was also a significant factor. Tallow, made from animal fat, was a precious resource, and burning candles unnecessarily was seen as wasteful, even irresponsible. Every flicker of light was a drain on the family's meager resources. So, as dusk settled, the decision to extinguish the candles and retire for the night wasn't just about discipline or piety. It was a sound economic choice. Why spend precious resources trying to extend the day when a natural world was calling for rest? A mainstream historical fact is that artificial lighting was incredibly rudimentary and expensive for the vast majority of the population until the advent of gaslight in the 19th century and widespread electricity in the 20th. This meant that daily rhythms were far more aligned with the natural light cycle. A quirky tidbit is the practice of snuffing candles. As a candle burned, the wick would often lengthen and char, causing it to smoke and dim. To maintain a brighter flame, people used snuffers, a scissor-like tool, to trim the wick. This tedious task highlights the constant maintenance required for even the most basic illumination. Historians still argue whether the forced early bedtimes due to lack of light inadvertently led to a society with generally better sleep hygiene and fewer chronic sleep-related issues compared to our modern, light-saturated world. Did darkness promote deeper rest, or simply greater boredom? It's a question that makes you ponder the true cost of our brightly lit nights. So, as the last candle is snuffed, plunging your small room into an almost tangible darkness, you feel the profound silence and stillness of a world truly at rest. There are no streetlights filtering through your window, no glowing screens from electronic devices. Your eyes, accustomed to the dimness, can just begin to discern the faint outlines of furniture. This isn't a scary darkness. It's a natural, encompassing darkness that prompts you to turn inward, to let your mind quiet, and to prepare your body for the deep, restorative sleep it craves. The darkness wasn't just a physical condition. It was a powerful enforcer of bedtime, a silent, all-encompassing signal that the day was truly, unequivocally over. You're deep in the embrace of sleep now, a sleep so profound it feels as ancient as the hills surrounding your Puritan village. Yet, even in slumber, the subtle currents of societal change eventually ripple through, albeit slowly. While the strictures of Puritan life remained largely consistent for decades, a significant spiritual movement, known as the Great Awakening, began to stir in the 18th century. This wasn't a sudden revolution, but a gradual intensification of religious fervor, a renewed emphasis on personal spiritual experience and emotional piety. And while it might seem counterintuitive, this awakening, with its focus on individual conversion and fervent worship, could have had subtle, indirect impacts on the daily rhythms, including the very concept of rest. Imagine revival meetings stretching long into the evening, filled with passionate sermons and emotional testimonies. For those swept up in the fervor, the traditional early bedtimes might have been challenged by the desire to continue in spiritual contemplation or communal worship. While children would still be expected to retire early, the adults might have found themselves pushing the boundaries of the night, driven by a newfound zeal. This wasn't about leisure, but about a different kind of spiritual labor that sometimes transcended the conventional definitions of productive daytime work. It's a fascinating tension, isn't it? The clash between strict adherence to established schedules and the overwhelming pull of a powerful emotional and spiritual experience. A mainstream historical fact is that the Great Awakening led to a significant increase in church membership and the establishment of new denominations, fundamentally shaping the religious landscape of America. A quirky tidbit related to this era is the emergence of itinerant preachers who traveled from town to town, often holding services outdoors to accommodate large crowds, sometimes for days on end. Imagine the spectacle, the energy, the sheer departure from the quiet, contained worship within the meeting house. Historians still argue whether the emotional intensity of the Great Awakening inadvertently paved the way for a slight loosening of the strict puritanical social controls, or if it simply redirected that intensity into new, equally rigid forms of religious expression. Did it liberate or merely rechannel? The impact, undoubtedly, was multifaceted. So, while your childhood bedtime was likely still enforced with unwavering consistency, the adults around you might have occasionally wrestled with the pull of these powerful spiritual tides. The gentle murmur of hymns might have lingered a little longer in the evening air, or the hushed voices of prayer might have continued beyond the usual hour. It was a subtle shift, not a dramatic overturning of norms, but a testament to how even the most deeply ingrained habits can be influenced by the powerful currents of human emotion and belief. The Great Awakening, in its fervent call to a deeper spiritual connection, offered a glimpse of a world where the clock wasn't always the sole master of the night, at least for the adults who embraced its fervent call. You're so deeply asleep now, enveloped in the heavy Puritan darkness, that you almost forget the ever-present threat of transgression. But in a society so rigidly structured, where even your bedtime was a matter of divine order, what happened if a child dared to resist, to extend their hours, to break the unwritten code of early slumber? The answer, as you might expect, was not met with a casual shrug or a gentle reminder. Deviance, however small, was seen as a moral failing, a sign of an unregenerate spirit, and it was met with swift and purposeful correction. Imagine, for a moment, the quiet rebellion. Perhaps you were a particularly curious child, fascinated by the faint glow of the moon or the rustle of animals outside, and you lingered just a little too long at the window after being told to lie down. Or perhaps you were whispering secrets with a sibling long past the hour of silence. These small acts of defiance, while seemingly innocuous to us, held far greater weight in a Puritan home. They weren't just about breaking a rule. They were about challenging the authority of your parents, and by extension, the divine order itself. The consequences for such transgressions, even regarding bedtime, would typically involve a range of disciplinary measures. A stern verbal reprimand, delivered with gravitas and references to Scripture, would be common. Your parents might remind you of the importance of obedience, the sinfulness of idleness, and the watchful eye of God. For repeated or more blatant defiance, physical correction, such as a switch or a hand, was a very real possibility. Remember, this wasn't seen as punishment for punishment's sake, but as a necessary tool for shaping a child's will, driving out sin, and guiding them toward righteousness. A mainstream historical fact about Puritan justice is its public nature, often involving community oversight and open admonishment for various offenses. A quirky tidbit, however, is that while extreme physical abuse was generally condemned, parents were often praised within the community for effectively breaking the will of their children, transforming a stubborn spirit into one of humble obedience. This wasn't about breaking their spirit, but molding it in the image of God. Historians still argue whether this strict disciplinary approach, even for seemingly minor infractions like resisting bedtime, ultimately instilled true moral conviction or simply forced outward compliance through fear. Did it create virtuous individuals or simply good actors? The debate continues to shape our understanding of Puritan psychology. So, as you lay there, the hypothetical chill of a switch still lingering in your imagination, you understand that an early bedtime in Puritan society wasn't just a suggestion. It was a deeply enforced rule, a product of both practical necessity and profound religious conviction. The darkness that finally claims you isn't just natural. It's a reinforced boundary, a clear signal that the day, and all its potential for both labor and minor mischief, is definitively over. You've journeyed through the profound darkness and strict rhythms of a Puritan night, a world where early bedtimes were as ingrained as prayer. But now, as we gently pull back toward your own modern era, it's worth considering the surprising, subtle ways these seemingly archaic habits have trickled down through time, influencing our own contemporary understanding of sleep and discipline. You might not realize it, but traces of that puritanical insistence on structure and purpose still echo in the way many of us approach rest today. Think about the persistent cultural emphasis on early rising, the early bird gets the worm mentality that still pervades our society. Or consider the lingering discomfort some people feel about wasting time by sleeping too much, a subtle echo of the puritanical condemnation of idleness. Even the idea of a fixed, consistent bedtime for children, a widely accepted good practice in modern parenting, has historical roots in these early, disciplined households. While the religious justifications have faded, the practical benefits of a regular sleep schedule, first rigorously implemented by groups like the Puritans, remain undeniable. A mainstream historical fact is that the Puritan work ethic heavily influenced the development of American capitalism and its emphasis on industry and financial prudence. A quirky tidbit is the enduring popularity of sleep training methods for infants and children, many of which advocate for strict schedules and independent sleep, a distant, secularized cousin to the puritanical insistence on self-control and early rest. You can almost hear the faint echo of a Puritan elder saying, "Let the child learn to master his own body, even in sleep." Historians still argue whether the lasting legacy of puritanical values, particularly their views on work and rest, has ultimately led to a healthier, more productive society, or if it has contributed to a culture of chronic stress and insufficient rest, particularly given the constant stimulation of the modern world. Are we healthier for it, or just more tired? It's a paradox worth pondering. So, as the faint, almost imperceptible hum of your own modern world begins to filter back into your awareness, you can appreciate the historical lineage of some of your own ingrained habits. The desire for a structured day, the valuing of productivity, and even the fundamental understanding that regular, sufficient sleep is vital, these aren't entirely new concepts. They are, in part, echoes of a time when the sun and the soul dictated the rhythm of rest. A time when going to bed early wasn't just a good idea, but a deeply held conviction. The Puritan children, tucked away in their dark, quiet homes, were unknowingly laying the groundwork for many of the sleep principles that we still adhere to, consciously or unconsciously, centuries later. As we gently drift from the echoes of the past, leaving behind the strictures of Puritan bedtimes and the flickering glow of tallow candles, you find yourself easing into the very present, into the quiet of your own room. The historical journey fades, replaced by the soft sounds of your immediate surroundings, perhaps the distant hum of traffic, the gentle sigh of a cooling fan, or simply the profound stillness that precedes true rest. The harshness of the Puritan era recedes, replaced by a profound sense of calm. The lessons learned from that disciplined world, however, linger in the quiet corners of your mind. The simple beauty of aligning with natural rhythms, the value of purposeful rest, and the enduring comfort of a quiet night. You're no longer a child in a rough-spun tunic, but an individual in a world filled with soft textures and gentle ambient light. As your eyelids begin to feel heavy and your thoughts grow slow and expansive, allow the images of that distant time to gently dissipate. The crackling hearth, the hushed prayers, the shared, communal silence of a village asleep, let them all dissolve into the soft, comforting mist of approaching slumber. There's no more need to strive, no more duties to fulfill tonight. The day has ended, and with it, all its demands. Feel the support beneath you, the softness of your sheets, the quiet embrace of your room. Your breath deepens, slowing, becoming a gentle, rhythmic tide. There are no more strict rules, no more historical facts to ponder, just the profound, welcoming invitation of sleep. Let your muscles relax, one by one, releasing any lingering tension from your head to your toes. The world outside can wait until morning. For now, there's only this moment, this quiet descent into peace. The last flicker of historical narrative fades, leaving you in a space of pure, unadulterated tranquility. The journey through time is complete. The night is here. It's time for you to truly rest.